not even arguing. Okay, we'll pause here for 2 seconds, and then we'll do tomorrow's Chodesh block. Kum learn about Gemara and Chodesh other base. The Mishnah, Yud Aleph, Amid Aleph. You saw somebody running after Metzia, chasing a Metzia. You saw another person chasing some object. For example, a deer was running by through your field with a broken leg. You saw birds that couldn't fly. In other words, if you really chased after them, you were able to catch up to them. And you shout out, my field should acquire them. He is Zeicha. But the deer was running normally. Or the birds are flying, which means if you were chasing, you probably would not have caught up with them. And you scream out, and they're running across your field, and somebody's chasing after them. He said, my field should acquire it on my behalf. It is meaningless. When is Chatzar effective? That you have to stand next to your field in order for it to be a Chatzar Hamishtameres, which we had a few days ago, and we had in Gittin. You know, Chatzar to be like private and guarded. So you have to stand next to the Chatzar. We did mention a few days ago that according to Rashi and Eruvin, and Tosfos, it seems that you have to actually be standing inside the Chatzar to be considered a Chatzar Mishtameres, even though the expression of the Gemara always is Bitzad, on the side. Says the Gemara, if so, why do you have to stand there? Why does he feel operate on your behalf? Your chatzah requires things, even if you're not aware of it. Says the Gemara, that only effective if it's a chatzah that's protected. If it's not protected, then it depends. If you're standing next to the field, fine. But he says the Gemara, how do you know this novel chiddush? How do you know that a chatzah she'eina mishtameres? How do you know that a chatzah that is not actually guarded? That then it depends if you're standing there. If you're standing there, fine. And the Tanya, because we're going to learn from the concept of shikha. Shikha is that if you left 1 or 2 stalks behind, you don't go back to collect it. So there's the owner, the employer, and then the workers. The employer has to forget first, and then the workers, and then even though he remembers later, it's too late. The chikha, you're not allowed to go back. You're not allowed to go back to collect it. So what happens in the case where you were in the field, and then you went to the city, and in the city you forgot? How do we treat that? Well, you remembered, and then you forgot. So the Brisa says as follows. Initially, it's very cryptic. The Tanya in the Brisa, you were standing in the city, not by your farm. But you said to yourself, I know that these sheep that are lying there in the field, I know that my worker forgot about it. I know they forgot about it. So he says, how do I know? If then this person himself forgets, in other words, he remembered, and then later he forgot. How do I know that that's not called shikha? Since you remembered, it's not called shikha. Even though you forgot it later, it's not called shikha. How do I know? So the Gemara says like this. Yochel, I would have thought shikha. I would have thought it should suffer. Oh, sorry. I just skipped one, didn't I? I'm saying, I make a declaration. I don't want it should be forgotten. I remember those sheets. I don't want it to be forgotten. So Yochel, I would have thought lo yeshikha, because I said I don't want it to be forgotten. I would have thought it's not. I would have thought it's not considered oimer. In other words, it's not oimer. Tamal oimer comes to tell you v'shachachta oimer b'sada v'shachachta v'loy be'ir. If you forgot in the field, the shikha is no. I would have thought it's not shikha, but really it is shikha. So then the Gemara concludes. The Brisa concludes: only in the field can you forget, but not in the city. In other words, it's not shikha. What's going on here? Is it or isn't it? Hoguvakasha. I just thought of saying yochel. I would have thought lo yeh shikha. I would have thought that it's not shikha because he said. I would have thought it's not. No, but really it is. Really, more thing I would have thought it isn't. I would have thought something incorrect. Really, it's shikha, even though you remember, but then you forgot. It's forgotten. The workers forgot first. You remembered, and then you forgot. It's considered forgotten, and then you conclude. The Nosel of Gemara, then you bring a pasuk that besada v'shachachta le'beir, that since you're in the city, it's not shikha. I don't know have a shikha. What's going on here? Elav hakam is only one way of understanding this. What's going on here? Besada, if you're standing in the field, shchuach mikara, you forgot first. The owner forgot that he has these. He left behind the sheep. Have a shikha. Shikha. What about Zochur? You remembered. What happens if you remembered and then later on you forgot? In other words, the employee forgot, but you remembered, and then later on you yourself forgot as well. The moment you remembered, your field was kainit, and therefore there's no longer shikha. Shechuach inch. Shechuach ain't shikha. My time, why not? Because you're standing in the field. Because you're standing in the field and you remembered that you have these sheaves, they become yours. And once they're yours, there's no shikha anymore. If this same thing transpired while you were in the city, you were not next to your field, even though you remembered, your field is not kindness on your behalf. So what do we see from here? If you're standing next to the field, you're kind. If you're not standing next to the field, you're not kind. That's how we know. I feel zocher. I feel zocher. Even if you remembered and then you forgot, have it shikha. It's a shikha. Why? Because your field cannot be kind back for you. You're not there. My time at the lesser gabay, you're not there. The liskale. So we see from here the idea is that you have to be standing next to your field. Says the Gemara. How do you know? Maybe this is the ruling in the Torah, nothing to do with standing next to the field or not. Maybe the Torah says when is shikha applicable if you're standing in the farm. If you're not near the farm, there's no shikha here. Nothing to do with the fact that your field is kind of back. No. The Besada Nehev shikha, maybe in the field, on the contrary. Let's change the brice around as well and say that maybe in the field it's considered shikha. But in the city, lo never shikha. But in the city, there's no shikha. Maybe that's what it is. It's exactly the concept. There's no logic to it whatsoever. And I don't care if you're in the field, next to the field, and your field should be kind of back. In the field, you can forget it's shikha. But once you come to the city, even though you forgot and your workers forgot, there's no forgetting anymore. On my cross, how can it be? It says clearly the pasuk lo yisashuv lekachte, don't return. That means you're not standing next to your field, you're far away, and it says don't return. So we see clearly from here that even though you're far away, where you did it correctly, it would be good shikha because you're not near the field. But if you're in the field and you remember, there's no shikha. The rabba shikha that you could have shikha when you're in the city. So what do you mean? This very pasuk that don't return, that's how we know that there's an avera in going back to collect the shikha that you forgot. Said, don't take it. My loy social don't return. The rabbis shikha that even in the city there is shikha. So the Bryce is trying to tell you here is that in the city, there is shikha because we have this possible social lekachli. Says the Gemara, don't we need it? This very possible look at it now. Shalafana ain't shikha if you're still going. You're going row by row, and even though you forgot something there, but you're still planning to go down the row, it's not called shikha. Shalachar shikha. Once you passed it and you left it behind, you can't turn around. That's called shikha. Shubabal toshav. So we use it for that. Zekla. In fact, the rule is kol shubabal toshav shikha. If you have to return, that's called shikha. Kol shein about toshav shikha. Omar Rav-Ashi. So Rashi says that Omar Kro. It says in the pasuk. Yeh l'rabba shikha. We have a special pasuk wherever you are. Even it should belong to the alman and all that. Wherever you are, even if you're in the city, it's a valid shikha. So it has nothing to do with whether that initially you tried to learn pshat nebraisa that if you're in the field, it's not a valid shikha. Only in the city it's a valid shikha. And we said, and the reason you gave was because standing next to the field is kind of for you. We said nothing to do with that. No, the field for sure is a shikha. The chiddush here is that even in the city, if you're standing in the city remote, far away from your property, it's still a valid shikha. We look for the pasuk here. Anyway, getting back to our original point, a chatzah has to be protected, so you have to stand. If it's not mishameres, then you have to be standing next to it. You have to be standing next to it in order to turn it into shtameres. Otherwise, it's not mishtameres. But in other words, if you have a field with gates all around it, you don't have to be there. So it's like an open field. The story of Gamliel was Canim, so you were traveling on a ship, and Machlekes Rashi tells what happened there. According to Rashi, you left home and you didn't have a chance to give Truma. He did, but he didn't do mice and all those other things. Truma, one piece of grain, one kernel can do the entire can pot to your entire field. Okay, but according to Tais, it's talking about this the third year you have to get rid of all your leftover Truma mice and give it out to the kohen, dish it all out, distribute it. He didn't do it because they had to rush some emergency. So on this ship with him were a few fellow travelers. Amr Gamliel, the 10% I plan to give Nasali Yeshua. Yeshua is a Levi, I'm giving it to Yeshua. How am I going to give it to him? We're all on this boat and that's sitting in my house. I'm going to give him a part of my property, and then sitting on top of the property will be his tavua. So that's a kinyan chatzah. Even though Rabbi Yeshua was, and the problem is going to be Yeshua is not there. Yeshua is on the boat, and it's not a chatzah mishtameres, as the Rishonim point out. Even though it's let's say in a closed area, but because Rabbi Gamliel had his own produce there, and you can have now some for Rabbi Yeshua and some for Rabbi Akiva. For each individual, it's not mishtameres because they're all mixed together in the same open field. So, and yet we see here that it worked. That's what we're going to ask. How did it work if he's not standing there? You're telling me that you have to be oime b'tzidei. And by, if it's a chatzah that's not protected. The Isa and the other Isa that I'm going to give Lamud, I'm going to have to give Meiser Ani to the poor people. I'll give it to Akiva ben Yosef because we learned already Bava Kamla and Shoshanagach that Rabbi Akiva was sorry, not Rabbi Akiva. We didn't learn there. That was Rabbi Yosef. But Rabbi Akiva was a Gabbai Tzedakah, and because he was a Gabbai Tzedakah, therefore it's good enough. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to give him a section of the field. Now, the question is, were they standing anywhere near the field? It was not a chatzah mishtameres because now you had three different people have ownership there of different parts of the crop. So it's not a chatzah mishtameres, and yet they were not oimid b'tzid, they were not standing there, and it was effective. So Ula's comment was, to Rabbi Abba, Ula said, it seems to me that this rabbi, Rabbi Abba, he never learned Gemara in his life. Pretty strong words. When he came to Rabbi Abba, came to Surah, he repeated to the Talmid Chacham this conversation because Ula didn't bother wasting his time explaining to Rabbi Abba the error in his question, or the fallacy in his question. This is what Ula said, this is what I asked him. So one of the Rabbanan said, Rabbi Gamliel, you thought, who told you anything about Chatzah? You decided that what is it chatzah? That's why he mocked you. Who says chatzah? Maybe learn Mar Kedushin that if I sell you property, land, and I sell you also portable things, you make a kinyan of land, it drags along automatically. Kinyan agav the karka, you're also kinyan the metalfit, and that's what he's doing. He's not chatzah. He gave him a piece of land, and he said, now that you're kinyan the land, with it drag along also the crop. Nothing to do with chatzah. That's why you didn't have to stand there. He gave the metaltim dragged along with the karka. Rav Zayda Kibla, Rav Zayda liked the answer, but Rav Abba liked Kibla. Rav Abba said, I don't like it. I'm not happy with it. If that's Ula's answer, I'm not happy. Omar Rabba says, Shap it over the Kibla. Rav Abba was right. It's the wrong answer. You know why? Because it's so simple. Why didn't they just do a kinyan chalipin, which is the most common form of chalipin? Rabbi Gamliel should have gone over, taken out, Rabbi Akiva, let's say, is buying it. Rabbi Gamliel should have given a handkerchief to Rabbi Akiva and said, okay, in exchange for the handkerchief, you get all the crop for the aniyim. And same with Rabbi Yeshua. And don't worry about the property or anything else, just do that. Why didn't he do that? Didn't have a handkerchief licked with menach halipin. The reason is, Rabbi Gamliel did not own everything that belonged to Meiser. Doesn't really belong to you. It goes to the Levim. It goes to the poor. What do I own in it? The right to choose which poor person I'll give it to. The right to choose which of the Levim I'll give it to. That's called Tevis Hana. We actually had a big machlekes whether that's considered mammon when we hang in Dorim and other places, or whether it's not considered mammon. Says Rabbi, even if it's considered mammon, but not substantial enough to use kinyan chalipin. Tevis Hana ain't a mammon like chalipin. So since it's not substantial enough, neither can you use it, or neither can you use it for kinyan agav. So the only possible kinyan here is kinyan chatzah. And Rabbi Abba had a good question. Kinyan chatzah, Rabbi Yeshua was not standing there. Tevis is not sufficient. You don't have sufficient value in it that you can use it to a kinyan agav. Says the Gemara, we don't like Rava's answer there, right? Matonas kuhuna nesiva ksivavu chalipin der mekam memchu. They said to Rabbi, you're wrong. The reason why they didn't use chalipin is something totally different. Chalipin is like you're buying and selling, and it's not appropriate. It's not dignified that you're supposed to give a gift to the kohenim, and it looks like you're selling it to him and buying it to him. If you give it a gift, so that's why we couldn't use chalipin. That's why he could use chalipin, and therefore could very well be. But he did give it to him together with land, kinyan agav, nothing to do with chatzah. Metaltin agav mekarkin asin. So therefore. And therefore, that's an answer to Rabbi Abba's question that this story in Gamliel has nothing to do with Chatzar and what's on top of it. Then you have a question, but Rabbi Yeshua was not standing there. This was kinyan agav. Chalipin they didn't do because, you know why they didn't chalipin? Because it's inappropriate. It looks like it's a commercial transaction when it should be a gift to a kohen. Papa, however, comes along and says, Das acheres makna oisen shiny. When there's das acheres over here, there's a difference between a metzia, you find something, or there's a difference between metzia and there's a difference between selling something, or giving a gift. And basically, the way Rashi and some Rishonim learn, we're going to have three different ways of going. When it comes to a get, the woman has to be standing right there. I don't care, even if the chatzim mishtameres, she has to be standing, because it has to be like yad, and the yad is right next to you. If it's a metzia like hefker, then it depends. If it's a chatzim mishtameres, then your chatzir is kind of shalom b'daitei. If it's not a chatzim mishtameres, then you have to be standing there. If it comes to a matana, das acheres makna, someone else is giving to you, then even if it's not a chatzim mishtameres and you're not standing there, it's good enough. As the Tzitz Chayshon explains, the das of the seller is good enough, because in fact, there's a whole discussion, who does the primary part of the kinyan? The seller, or is it the buyer? Is the main part of the kinyan the seller to remove it from his ownership, and then the buyer just has to show that he's the new owner? Or is the main person here, the buyer, is taking it out to make it his? So das acher, Papa is saying, I believe in das acheres makna, that the seller is doing the main thing. So as long as it's guarded, the seller is standing there, that's good enough. That's good enough. And therefore, now even though Ram Gamliel is not standing there at all, anywhere near them, but the seller is giving it over, and that's good enough. So I think more further, how do I know that? From our very Mishnah. Now we learned the Roy says, you saw them running after Metzia. Again, if you could chase after this deer with a broken leg and catch up to it, then it's yours, even though you didn't catch up to it. If someone gives you a gift for deer, do you have to also chase after it? Rabba heard or accepted. Even you run after them. The aim again, if you cannot catch up, you're kind of. It's like a chatzah she'ein mishtameres. You can't catch up to them, and yet because it's das acheres makna, you kind of. My timer, la mishum das acheres makna oisan shiny is different. Papa, how do you get? What about get? Das acheres makna oisan. The husband's giving it to her. And Ula says the only way the get is effective is who she'omed is bitzad beisa. She needs to be standing there next to her house. Bitzad chatzer by a courtyard. Says the Gemara, shiny get the isa bav karcha. Right now the Gemara thinks because the get is done against her will, therefore she has to be standing there. And the Gemara is going to ask on quite the contrary. Maskul asher v'idei, v'lav kabel chaymer on the contrary. Ma get the isa bav karcha. I don't even need her opinion. Yet I medes bitzad beisa. If she's standing there next to her house, then it's effective. And loy if not matana de medaite, a matana which is medaite, like kolshkein, surely. A matana, which is medaite, surely you have to be standing there. We need your consent. El Rabashi like follows: Chotzer israboi mishum yad. A chotzer, like we learned just before in yesterday's blot, or in today in Shabbos' blot, a chotzer is like yad. It says v'nosan beyoda, of a lagora mishlichus, where it could behave like shlichus, it will be like shlichus, and therefore as follows: Gabe get the chayvelo, get is bad for her. Can you be a shliach for somebody without their knowledge and harm them? Of course not. Only if it's a schus for them. So get, which is bad for her, ain't chavlon b'fonim. It can't be a shliach. So she has. Then it's only yad. Yad, she has to be there. Your hands attached. Gabi matana, the schus. When it comes to matana, it's something which is a schus for that person. So then I can be a shliach. I don't even know the person has no idea. It can be a shliach. Because zachin la'adam shalei b'fonim. You zachin have a person even they're not around. One of the Rishonim asks, an interesting question. You were saying constantly the matana is a good thing for a person. Didn't we learn in the Gemara, Soine matanas yichi, if you hate matanas, you'll live a long life? So the chayda, picking up a metzia for my behalf, or giving a matana, if I don't know, it's not a schus. You're actually cutting my life short. So the Rishon says, facts of life is, even though there's a pasuk saying matanas yichya, the vast majority of people are going to accept the matanas regardless, and we follow the roiv. So just quickly, just did it before already. Gufa, let's analyze. Roy, so there's someone running after the deer. Again, as long as he's able to catch up with them, that makes it a chatzah mishtameres, because you can catch up to this deer. What about matana? Do you also have to catch up? That's talking about an object that's hefker. What about a matana? Hey, what's it din? Even though you chase after him, you cannot reach him. It's good enough. Boy, Rav asked the question. Okay, and so Rabba said, even though you didn't catch up with them, it's good enough. Okay, we'll stop here. We'll continue tomorrow.